Hey, welcome back. It's Louisa Munson from Feel Good Astrology. Welcome back to the show. If it's the first time you've listened, then please do. If you like it, give us a little like or a thumbs up or something. Anyway, this is a sort of like trial show just to see how it gets on. I really like the idea of just having a kind of daily check-in to talk about astrology, see what's going on in the community and see, how we can meet in these crazy times and do something rather spectacular. So before we get going, let's just set the scene a little bit and talk around what we're going to cover today. So sorry, there's me clearing my throat. Yesterday, when we were chatting yesterday, we were looking at astrology from the perspective of the divine feminine as recommended or asked about by one of our community members, Colleen Murphy. And so we spoke a little bit around like the masculine and feminine. And then, I always like to sort of take things from what's arising in people. And what came up for me was I got this lovely comment from Irene. She was talking about one of the episodes I did about Uranus in the ninth house. And she was saying, look, I've got Uranus in my ninth house at 27 degrees, Saturn at 26 degrees, both in the sign of Sagittarius. Also have Neptune in my ninth house, almost on the midheaven in Capricorn. Would you like to give me a short vision about these placements? Well, the funny thing is, right, I have been working behind the scenes with a good pal of mine to talk about the different astrological generational patterns, because it's absolutely something that really motivates me, because we've each got something to give, and I think it's really important that we are there for each other and understand the kind of stars that we were born under and how we can help each other when we're going through similar things. So for instance, anyone that lives beyond the age of 30 will go through a Saturn return. And for anyone that's had the Saturn return, I definitely have, you can usually attest to the fact that around like 29, 30, some big kind of change comes. So lots of people get a little bit, they find they've got more responsibility at a time when they're actually wanting to get rid of responsibility. That's usually what kind of happens. But anyway, according to which generation you're born into, like some generations have their Saturn return much easier than other people. And so what I want to do today, given that Irene here, who has joined us from Spain, she's revealed to me, and this is where I think a lot of astrologers and people that like astrology, they get quite excited, so I know that she's got her Uranus at 27 degrees and her Saturn at 26 degrees in the sign of Sagittarius. And I know that puts her in one of the millennial patterns. And so what I agreed to do was look at the millennial patterns in this show. But before we go any further, let's first of all have a look at the stars for tomorrow. This is a forecast I did a little bit earlier today. And whilst I'm talking, I'm also going to be pulling out a card for tomorrow as well. So let's bring on the forecast and then we'll get back to the meat of the show. Hey, so for tomorrow's astrology, I guess as we start the day, we're feeling quite intense still. Yesterday or like tonight that we're about to go into, we are, going into the first conjunction with Pluto, since Pluto has changed signs, and that's where the moon is conjuncting it. And so that's going to be pretty intense as we go through the experience of what it is to be independent and also being in control. It's going to bring up quite a lot of stuff, and it's the shape of things to come for the next 20 years or so. Big themes coming. But anyway, the 14th itself has a few intrinsic challenges. First is that, we've woken up feeling a little bit intense and a little bit entangled with our thoughts and our thinking, and how can we be individuals? How can we really own our individuality? And on top of that, we're also feeling a little bit insecure. We've got Saturn in a square to Venus, and that never goes very well. It always shows us how not enough we are. Like, where do we not feel enough? Where do we feel slightly insecure? Like we underperform? Where don't we appreciate ourselves enough? And to add insult to injury, we're also feeling quite snippy in the way we're communicating with people. We've got the moon in a square to Mercury, so we're likely to snap. We're likely to snap because we just don't feel good enough. So we're under-resourced, I guess, is the overall word, and also feeling intense. Now, the flows for tomorrow are actually quite useful. So, for instance, we've got the moon in a lovely trine with Venus. And also we've got a lovely semi-sextile between Venus and the North Node. Now, what that really means to me is if we really check in with ourselves tomorrow on the 14th of April, if we sit down and just check in with ourselves and say, how am I feeling today? And, whatever answer you come up with, like, is this actually mine? Like, who does it belong to? If we actually do some internal checking out, I actually think a lot of this upset, a lot of this irritation will kind of just disappear. It almost feels like what's getting us tomorrow is other people's expectations that we've taken on their behalf. So there you go. That's my thoughts for tomorrow, the 14th of April. I hope you have a great day. Fabulous. So let's just say a few hellos. So Irene, the young woman that asked me about the actual degrees, so Uranus at 27 and Saturn at 26. Irene's here. So thank you for joining me, Irene. I'm really, really pleased that you're here. We've also got Gillian joining us. I know where Gillian is. She's not in Portugal and she's not in Spain. So we are reaching a few different countries. We've also got Mr. Good Morning Portugal. That's actually my hubby. He's actually kind of like my executive producer. Anyone else that's listening, please do just let us know where you're from. And also if you've got a question. Now, before I get any further, and we've also got Colleen as well. Hey, Colleen. Welcome back. Thanks for coming back. So I did pull a couple of cards. So this one is for tomorrow. Oh, Zana. Now, these are, I don't know if you guys have seen these before. Messages from the angels. The Doreen Virtue. I've had these for donkey's years, but Zana, this is an extra message for tomorrow. It's saying you're protected from all types of harm. The worst is now behind you, and I ask you to relax and feel safe. And then I also pulled, that's so nice. Colleen's got these cards. They're really good, aren't they? Now, I pulled a card for somebody in the chat room. If you're happy for me to share it online, I will do that. If not, I will send you a private message. So Irene saying, I'm very happy to be here and hello to everyone. That's fantastic. So let's have a look at these different star patterns according to generations. So like I shared with you yesterday, Irene, she's put in a comment because she's got quite an unusual pattern that she's been born into. And people born around 1989 to 1990 have these. I'm guessing that Irene, I'm guessing that she was born in 1989 because the two planets, the Saturn and Uranus, were still in Sagittarius. So it'd be great if you could confirm that, but you don't have to. So let's have a look now. So these are the millennial patterns from 1998 to 1989. I've done a kind of chart to represent a midpoint of them all. Now, the funny thing about these patterns that we see coming up is like, Irene was talking that she's got a Saturn conjunct Uranus at like 27 or 26 and 27 degrees. And this is Saturn and Uranus down here in the sign of Sagittarius. Now, she was born with this conjunction, but it was actually part of a bigger conjunction because these two planets are working towards Neptune. Neptune's the slowest moving. Saturn's moves, faster than the other two, and Uranus is slow moving as well. So they're forming this really, really slow conjunction, but it's three planets all together with very different energies all coming together. And because this is taking place over the space of 2 years, in effect, it starts probably about 3 years before, or lasts in its entirety around 3 years, because they've all got to come together, get closer and closer together, and then they come apart as well. Now, the other thing that's kind of special about this pattern is that it's in opposition to, it looks like it's a lot in opposition, but it's in opposition to Chiron here. And what I'm going to do is just make it a bit easier to see. So I've taken out all the planets, and you can see that we've got Uranus, Saturn and Neptune, Chiron in opposition. And then we've got Pluto here, which is this is the slowest moving planet we've got. Now, these blue lines, for those of you that know about astrology, these blue lines represent where there's an easy flow, where it's kind of really easy to work with the energy. So Pluto is supporting all of these planets to express themselves. And Pluto is about control and understanding the sort of power we've got. But these oppositions are very, very difficult. And the combination of these three planets in this particular generation is really, really intense. So the biggest theme that's going on for these like millennials born 1988 to 1989 is that they've got this sort of sensation of what's actually real. So first of all, we've got like this idea of grounding creativity. That's really coming from Saturn, which is all about grounding, materializing, making things real. And it's combining with Uranus, which is very sort of haphazard, very spontaneous, very much about download. You know, we get lots of information and intel. It's very much about consciousness. So it's like consciousness and making consciousness real, and how do we ground consciousness? I think there are a lot of really good intuitives born around this time. But we've also got Neptune, and Neptune is a higher harmonic of Venus. It's very much about creativity, and it's got no boundaries. So this is like really interesting, is that we've got like this boundaryless planet, Neptune, that makes it very, very difficult to see these patterns. Then we've got Saturn, that is very boundaried, if you think Saturn's got the rings. And then you've got Uranus, which is neither boundaried or contained. It just arrives and then it disappears, it changes, it's always changing. So we've got these very sort of different energies coming together in the sign of Sagittarius and Capricorn. They all connect in Capricorn finally. And so we've also got the emphasis of moving through Sagittarius, which is about inspiration, expansion, taking ideas and making them really big. And then we've got them kind of coming in on themselves. Now, what I've noticed with this generation, people born in 1988 to 1989, obviously I'm a bit older than that. I'm born in 74, and thankfully we don't have these massive patterns that you guys have got. But anyway, and I'm going to talk about a couple of other patterns. And I know that two people listening today are part of the mid 1960s pattern, which is really intense. But anyway, a lot of the things I notice with Uranus is very much about social responsibility. We get a lot of shared themes with like Uranus here is very, very conscious. It's one of the planets that's associated with Aquarius. And so it's very much about doing the right thing, very much about ecology, very much about the environment, very much about equality, diversity, gender, all of those issues. And then Saturn seeks to order things. So we've got like the rise of social responsibility. I worked for a large social responsibility charity in the UK called Business in the Community that was run by Prince Charles, soon to be King Charles, in fact. And when I was there, I was actually almost like in this fishbowl of energy with these millennials born in this time who all had loads and loads of qualifications and a really, really strong need to be active and to stand up for what they believe in. So they've also got this energy of standing up. But here's where it gets really difficult, is it's in opposition to Chiron, and Chiron is the wounded healer. So how does that play out? Let's just go back again. It brings out our worst hurt. So like Chiron shows us our most difficult pain. And when it's in opposition to Saturn in particular, it shows where we're disappointed with authority. Saturn represents authority. Saturn in our charts can show us our parents. And so we've got a generation of people, or people born very specifically at this time. In fact, I know one person watching this has got a child born in the time of this. And maybe they can confirm if they are disappointed with their elders and with their parents. But there is this feeling of the worst hurt and disappointment, and it is karma. It's being perpetrated by those that are meant to be standing up and protecting them. And then, because we've also got Neptune in this opposition as well, there's a real, you can't really see this, but it says there's pinpointing cause of pain as being because of traditions. and also projection. So it's really hard to get very close to the projection, like to really understand the pain. It almost eludes this generation. So they feel very, very strongly, want to make a difference, have got some real hurts about, the way they're raised and also the world they're inheriting. And also they can't quite grab the pain. Now, I'm just going to quickly go back into the show and see if we've got any comments coming in, because I'm interested to see if you know anyone who's born in this time, or if you're born in this time, how that is like resonating. So we've got Colleen saying, oh, and she's got about 13 other decks. That's great. Gillian, I will share your card very soon. In fact, it's called Patience. So you need to have a bit of patience. I know you do anyway. You're full of patience. So we've got Irene, almost born in September 88. So you're one of the early pattern people. So it just goes to show just how slow these patterns come in. My producer saying the pointer is working perfectly. That's great. Okay. So no real comments coming in at the moment. Ask if you've got a question about this, because what I'm going to show you now is how these patterns arise. Because one of the things that I am quite interested in, Saturn and Uranus, they have a resonance with their orbits. So you'll find that, like, for instance, when you get into your mid-40s, you tend to go through a Saturn square and also your Uranus opposition. A Saturn opposition and also Uranus opposition at the same time. Although like Uranus's cycle, its orbit is so much bigger than Saturn's, at some point they kind of meet up. And so what we've got around the time of 44 years is pretty important for, most people. That's why lots of people talk about we go into the midlife crisis. But Saturn and Uranus, they come together every 44 years, or roughly like 43 to 45 years, but they go on a resonance of roughly 44. And so when we go backwards in time, we can see that they come in to agitate another generation to take action. And the next time they're coming in to an alignment is in 2033. They're going to be coming back together, and they're going to be really resonating with the charts of the people born in from, let's say, 1988 to 1990. Now, in between times, at 22 years, there's also an almost opposite pattern going on. I just want to show you this because I know I've got a couple of people here born in the mid-60s that fall into this. So if I just go back so you can just quickly see it. So you've got these patterns. You've got Neptune, you've got Saturn, you've got Uranus, you've got Pluto, and you've got Chiron. If we go back 22 years, we've got another generational pattern. And so this is for people born between 1964 to 1967. Now, I think it's tightest around 1966. And I know that someone listening in was born around that time. Now, here you've got Saturn and Chiron in a conjunction. In the previous one, they were in an opposition. And then you've got Uranus in opposition to Chiron again, and Uranus in an opposition to Saturn. But Uranus is also in a conjunction with Pluto. So Saturn conjunct Chiron is a very sort of like different energy to Saturn conjunct Uranus. So in the 1960s astrology, Saturn conjunct Chiron is that we have wounding from our family, very, very similar, but it feels like there's nothing we can do about it. It feels like it's just what we're born with, and there's absolutely no way to get away from it. It's almost we're born with the hurt, we're born with the stain almost. And it also makes us very pessimistic about our hurts, and very pessimistic about our parents, and very, very much hurt by authority in general. Because Saturn does represent authority. And then on the other side of it, we've got Uranus in a conjunction with Pluto. So we've got Pluto, which is about control, death, dying, recycling, renovation, transformation. But he's a badass, Anyone that's had Pluto in a sensitive position will know that Pluto really transforms your life. In fact, it kind of blows it up a bit. And then we've got Uranus as well. Now, Uranus is, as I said earlier, is about consciousness and is a bit of a rebel rouser. It's rebellious, it's independent, it's unusual. And it also wants freedom and independence, and it runs. And so we've got this absolute disappointment with the hierarchy, disappointment with the generation preceding them. And then right on this side, when we can't control it, we run. That's the Pluto and Uranus. It's like in this generation, there are so many people that were the first kids to really grow up with divorce, but also some of the first people to really have maybe not one family, but two families, or to live in quite a different way from our peers. And so we've got a very similar theme, if you think about it. We've got a deep discipline. And if I show you in this, you'll see a very similar layout. So you've got two planets here, two planets here. And the thing is, they're all really slow moving planets. And then we've got Neptune, thankfully, supporting them because they need some support. And if you're lucky, you're born at a time when you've got other planets playing into this and helping. But for instance, with the 1964-1967 pattern, Pisceans and Virgos born into this really, really suffer. If you've got your moon in Pisces or something, that's very difficult. In fact, I know somebody with their moon in Pisces right in the crux between Saturn and Chiron. That's really difficult. And of course, for the Sagittarians and Geminis, which are 90 degrees from these placements, there's a lot of difficulty. So there's definitely a relatedness. And it's funny because often these generational patterns go from one generation to another. So a lot of people in the 1960s who really felt the trauma of their birth then go and have babies in their early 20s, like 22, 23, and they're birthing a very similar pattern into their offspring. It has its differences, but yeah, it's still there. I did mention that 2033, when Uranus and Saturn are opposite the natal Neptune and Saturn and Uranus, it's going to be pretty challenging for them. But they've also got their Pluto square coming up in their late 30s. That's also going to be a time to really look at how you get control and what control means. Like for people born in 1988 to 1990, for instance, the idea of how much control you can have in your late 30s is going to be very different to people born in the 60s and 70s. You know, we may well have had a bit more time to accrue some wealth. Not all of us, definitely not me. But anyway, you know, there are some big changes. And then the Chiron return, which happens to everybody if we get to 50, when Chiron moves all the way back around the chart and comes back to where it was at the time, place, and date of birth. Chiron return is really intense. But because you've got all these planets down here in opposition, not only do you go through your Chiron return, but you go through an opposition to Uranus, an opposition to Saturn, and an opposition to Neptune. So it's pretty tough. Now, there's another pattern I want to share, but I just want to check in and see if there are any questions coming in or comments. So we've got some other people joining us now. So we've got Gaining Wisdom saying, hey, hey, thanks for joining me. And thank you for your comment on the first video. I really, really feel for you. And I absolutely love your intimacy and transparency. It's absolutely beautiful. It's breathtaking, in fact. Thank you for that. Colleen saying, loving this today. One of my kids is a millennial, and I'm sure can relate to much of what you're referencing. Well, you know what? The millennials, you know, I'm looking at their generations quite a bit because they span over a good 15-year time zone, Colleen. And they're not born with just this pattern. You know, every 5 years, there's a kind of another iteration of it. But I think this is the most, I think this is the biggest pattern that we've got in the millennials. But I'm going to be talking a lot more here. Gaining Wisdom, 74 Aries here. Gaining Wisdom, I'm a 1974 person as well. I will have a look at our generation another time for sure. And I'm a Sagittarius. Gillian is saying, I have a child born in 1990, had missed the point they would be described as a millennial. Yeah, it's funny because you think in 1990 they're not going to be millennials, but I think it's about the time that they're coming into the world and really sort of like getting out there. And it's interesting. So there's, I know that we do have, a couple of people who are born in the first pattern and then they've got kids in the second pattern, and you're learning that together, you're sharing it together. And when you look at the astrology of families, you can see that you can see what's going on. Basically, it's really quite fascinating. Irene, let me know what your thoughts are, and if you've got any questions about this. We've got Shannon joining us from Texas as well. Hey, Shannon. Mwah. And got a new person commenting that I've not met before. Hi, Richard Laws. A 1964 Aquarius. Yes, so you'll have some of this pattern going on in your chart. You're at the start of it, so you're not at the tight end of it, thankfully, but it will still be playing into your chart for sure. I love this. Thank you so much. All right, I can see we're coming to the end of the show, and I don't want to obviously overdo it. Because I need to take the kids out to ride their bikes. But let's have a look at this final, just finish off this and look at the final pattern. So the biggest themes then for the 1964 to the 1967 generation is that they've got this kind of calcified hurt, because Saturn is very much about the bones and formation, and Chiron, which is just hidden here, is about our primal hurts. And it's an impossible, hurtful situation, and possibly coming from boomer parents, because they've got all the things that they keep saying, if you work hard enough, you'll get all this. And then they try to control situations by fleeing and have this really almost urgent sense to escape. Things like feel like death, and it's like they just want to get out the door. And it's not that they want to leave you necessarily, or they don't want to be irresponsible. It's just it feels like the weight of the expectations from the pain is too much to bear, and they just have to get out of it, which is actually quite sensible. They're also one of the first generations to really use self-help books. But can the pain ever be transformed? It's always reopening with this very, very difficult opposition. And then pinpointing the cause of pain is a bit easier for them. They can pinpoint it, and they see it as being where they've got control mechanisms and traditions holding them in place. So 1964 to 67, they see their parents' control, authority, but also the traditions, where it's the guys in the 1980s and 89, like 89 to 90, for instance, they are really seeing it as having crappy parents, I think, and inheriting a world from irresponsible people. So anyway, the last pattern that I think is worth exploring just a little bit, and it's a related pattern, and that's for the people born, the young adults born in 1999 to 2000. So they've got, these guys are going to be shaping the world in the early 30s, just as Saturn goes into its conjunction with Uranus, and just as that kicks off things for the people born at the end of the 1980s and 1990s. But what they've got is they've got Pluto conjunct Chiron. So again, one of these outer planets is connected. So we've got Pluto, the planet of trauma and control, in a conjunction with Chiron, which is about our pains and our wounds. It almost feels like it's cruel, like they've had pain inflicted on them, because Pluto can really show up as a bully in charts. They've also got Uranus in a conjunction with Neptune in Aquarius. Now, it's fascinating because Pluto has just recently gone into Aquarius and is going to be there until 2043. So for the next 20 years, it's going to be really intense for these guys born at the turn of the century. They're going to be really feeling it. As they're turning 23 to 24, Pluto is aligning to their Neptune and Uranus conjunction. So they're getting a really challenging time in their mid-20s that other generations don't quite get in the same way. And they're going to have one of the biggest Saturn returns going on, because when they have their Saturn return, it's also going to be square their Pluto, and it's also going to be conjunct their Uranus. It's going to be really square. Hang on, as big changes of Saturn return, this square. It's not square Pluto. Oh, it's going to be square transiting Pluto. Right, sorry. Bit of a typo. I was doing this at 3:00 in the morning. So anyway, that's a little bit of information about the the potentials that we've got from the generations, and I absolutely love it. So Irene is sharing, yes, I resonate strongly with what you share. I've had many fears since birth, mainly because of my sensitivity. Don't know if this can be related to this particular planet placements. Well, in terms of your comment on the podcast that I recorded about the Uranus in the 9th house, I'm going to add something in private to that, so I'm going to put that into the conversation. In particular, with sensitivities, you will also be looking at the personal planets. So in particular, the moon would be really, really important. I would also say Mercury, Mars, the Sun, and Venus, and also your ascendants is really, really worth having a good look at as well. So anyway, I'm going to draw this to a close. Thank you so much for joining me today, everybody. I really enjoyed it. If you've got any suggestions of things that you would like me to go over, just give me a shout. Now, this is, I did say I was going to check this out. This is Patience, the card for Gillian. It says, now is the time to learn, study, and gather information. Enjoy being a student, because in future you'll synthesize your knowledge into action. And I don't doubt that at all. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully catch up with you soon. If I can just find my outro video. Where is it? Must be here. Yeah, I got it. All right. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.